You go there, but only if you really have a good understanding of what you're signing up. A postdoc is like a second PhD that you get in 2 years. Because you think it's a seminar, but the faculty is being interviewed. But the problem is then you need to find the lab that will let you do that research that would be very different from your PhD experience. If you're on a faculty interview, what happens is that they look at you as a representative of your generation. Can you be the leader in your field? It's like your second PhD, so you can do whatever you want. It's your money, and your professor won't tell you what to do. Then you have to show that you have real publications, and that's where the pressure comes from. Right? That's where you have to really nail it. Believe me, 99% of proposals are not unique, but many of them get accepted. Why?
I went to a really interesting lecture series about how to compare a position last spring. One of the things they talked about is usefulness of doing a postdoc.
In which country? Faculty students in the US. Yeah.
And one of the things that they talked about was the usefulness of doing a postdoc is often okay, you had your PhD, you now know how to do X, and you had expertise in X.
Yes.
And you need to have some other thing Y that would complement X to make this unique combination X plus Y that we were talking about. This. What's this?
Ideally. Yes.
Decision that only you can do, or that you are one of the few people who can do, by combining some previous expertise with some unique fit that might be an unexpected way to build off of that, or a useful way to build off of that other people might not have.
That's the right way to think about it, right? But then you need to be careful. So, for example, if you're a condensed matter physicist, you move to a biology lab, how long will it take you to write a paper, to do research that would give you new ideas? So then you have this timeline too. It's when I was a postdoc, I switched from ferroelectrics and multiferroics that I worked as a PhD into electrochemistry. It's very different, completely different thing. And it took me a year just to, ramp up my brain sort of. And then I was ready to apply for faculty because in some way I lost a year. So, but I was able to maybe provide a different perspective. So I had a number of interviews, and then many people were pretty positive. So the thing is, I think it really depends. If you can, then go for it. But the problem is then you need to find the lab that will let you do that research that would be very different from your PhD experience. And like I said, there are many applicants per position today. And so imagine you're a professor, you have 200, 300 applicants. And for a specific project, because a postdoc is not a PhD. During PhD, it's your educational degree, so you explore. During a postdoc, it's a contract, so you work on a specific project often, unless you're very lucky to be in the lab where you have freedom, but that's rare. And then, of course, then a professor is very, very interested to find the best fit. So if you apply to a bio lab with your condensed matter physics background, unless you find that amazing advisor who'd be ready to risk it, it's really hard then. So there's this problem also of finding the position that will let you deviate enough to come up with those A plus B ideas, sort of merged ideas between the two. But if you can, that's amazing. I think that's where probably the top labs at least in the US, what I found when I was at Stanford, we had many people from very different fields working in the same lab. That was amazing. And I think at places like MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, Harvard, maybe Caltech too, they tend to be more open sort of to other fields to try to come up with new ideas inside the lab by hiring a postdoc from a different direction. So that's where it happens. But at mid-level universities, I think it's pretty rare from my observation. Another great idea, at least in the US and Europe, it's harder, I think, but in the US you have a lot of fellowships. So postdoc fellowship it's like your second PhD, so you can do whatever you want. It's your money, and your professor won't tell you what to do. In most cases, okay. Depends, of course, but in most cases. So that would be a much better chance of, it will give you a greater chance of finding a faculty position than a regular postdoc. Because a postdoc, also it means that you were competitive back when you were a PhD, right? So apply for fellowships if you can. Even if you don't have a good idea, still do it. You may lose time, yes, maybe a little. You may waste a little bit of time, but I don't think it's a waste actually, because you learn through anyway. Waiting until everything becomes perfect can take forever.
What do you work for in that postdoc? Like, what should be like?
Well, it really depends on your advisor. It really depends on the position. Some positions are open positions. I was lucky to have a postdoc where I could develop my own projects in a field that I had very little experience in. That's another interesting thing, but that's rare. In most cases, you're hired to do the things for which there's money. So it can be a project from a government, could be a company paying for a certain development, whatever. So it really, really depends on, unlike a PhD position, like a postdoc position is often very time limited. It can be 1 year only sometimes. It can be 3-4 years, depends. And depends on the country a lot too, because there are some countries where it's much easier to have longer postdocs than in others. But if you want to go to academia, you want to make sure your postdoc is as short as possible. Because the longer you stay, the more you compete with postdocs who are younger than you. And for example, at least in Switzerland, we have in general rule, 35 years older or older, and you cannot be hired as an assistant professor. So in the US, it's also a bit similar. So once you get to the age of mid-tenure track to the end of tenure track, so that age, so say you do a second postdoc or third postdoc, it's almost impossible to find a position. People do find it. I know postdocs who did 2 postdocs and got pretty good positions at pretty good schools, but it's rare. So a postdoc is short. You really want to ideally, you want to find an advisor who will let you do what will benefit your career the most. If you go for a postdoc, you go for a very big reason. So a PhD, I list a lot of reasons here. Some may come just to do research for technical skills for a PhD badge, That's cool, maybe. I never really wear it, but maybe some people like it. But it can be, like, there are many reasons. It's more an educational degree anyway. But postdoc is a very special, like I said, very special position because you're paid very little, you know a lot, and you don't have a good contract. Your contract can end, especially in the US, pretty much anytime. So they can cut you off anytime. And then everything really comes down to your advisor and what are the agreements. So you need to know why you go for a postdoc first, and then make sure your advisor fits your vision for your next career steps. Because if he or she doesn't, your postdoc may be just a waste of time. And then the question will be what you will do next. So if you do a postdoc in biotechnology or bioengineering, that probably can be helpful to be hired in a company in some pharmaceuticals or biotech. It's possible. So sometimes they require you to have a postdoc. But in physics, I almost never heard of anyone requiring, maybe at IBM, but that's like a super big exception. But I don't think you need a postdoc there. So if you go for a postdoc somewhere, you want to make sure that postdoc also leaves you a plan B possible. So if you're not going to academia, what will you do? Will that postdoc help you or actually reduce your chance of getting hired in industry, in startups, anywhere else? So if you do astrobiology, our favorite topic now, so how likely will you be hired in industry when you do a postdoc? So you didn't go to industry after PhD, you did postdoc, so you went down the academic track, and then you say, no, I want to go back to industry, or whatever, I want to go to industry. But your industry experience is zero. Your topic, your expertise is in extraterrestrial life, and we don't even know if it exists, right? So it's kind of fun. And then you come to an interview. What will you tell them? Like, what will you say? I think this is where I really suggest being very strategic. So your questions really, really hit the point where you should ask these questions in advance, not like close to your defense, because then might be sometimes too late. So you look for people in advance. Like Glenn said, you go to conferences. As a postdoc, I suggest going to conferences as much as you can as a PhD too, because you find those advisors at conferences. You see those people at conferences. Sometimes you say, no, I don't want to go to this lab. And that lab I really like. So, yeah. Exactly. One of my previous advisors said to me that a postdoc is like a second PhD that you get in 2 years. That's it. It's very simple, but that's sort of the in some way it's an it depends on where you apply for faculty. So in the US, at least, across the major schools, the top schools, that's sort of the expectations of your postdoc. If you stay long enough in it, that you should show an impact that is somewhat close to what you did in your PhD in terms of the impact, or better. If you just spend like half a year, so if let's say you started your postdoc in the spring, and then your faculty application round starts in typical in the fall, and then you apply, you can still apply. You don't have to show that you are a postdoc and you have this kind of results. That's not important. But if you skip a year, so you have one extra year, so your first year or second year postdoc already, then it's different. Then you have to show that you have real publications, and that's where the pressure comes from. All right, that's where you have to really nail it. Yes.
Oh, I think Sarah said that. I think it was very relevant. That when you're doing postdoc, not postdoc but faculty interviews as a postdoc, the people evaluating you are not necessarily in your field. It can be very different field,
not in your specific field, but they will be from physics department. Hopefully.
What we meant by that is that when you need to learn to do talks that are going to be understandable by a broad, you need to know when you do talks that are very specific, right, and talks that need to be more broad. Yes. You'll be able to do all of them and switch between them and know your audience.
Yeah, the Cornell had recently had its interviews for postdocs, and they were giving seminars to everyone. And
for postdocs or for faculty?
Sorry, for faculty.
Okay.
It's postdocs giving talks.
Sure.
And it's the committee is a mix of people doing all different kinds of fields, right?
Correct.
And condensed matter is approximately a third of our physics department.
Because they hire a colleague, they're not hiring a condensed matter physicist.
Right.
And that's where it comes from. Why they all want to, but it doesn't mean that they will judge your talk. They will not judge your expertise that much. They will still listen to the colleagues who are experts.
Right.
But they will look at how you present.
Right. And so if you make it interesting to all of them,
yes,
that's a lot more important than just talking about something that's super technical.
Oh yes,
but
for sure.
Only interesting to the condensed matter physicists.
Yep.
And the audience.
Faculty interviews, a faculty interview talk is a very special type of talk. Well, in some way, maybe you attended seminars, right, of faculties coming to your departments. I would say this way. So not often, but sometimes those faculties, you think it's a seminar, but the faculty is being interviewed. It's not that uncommon. So even more so, you as a faculty can be invited somewhere, and then just for a talk, and then later the department will say, well, we liked you so much, and maybe we can make an offer to you. So that also happens. Because people are being lured out of their schools every time, all the time. So the thing is, in those departmental seminars, you can. That's why I very much encourage everyone to attend those seminars, regardless of which university you work in, because often you see which talks can ignite your imagination, especially from other fields. So imagine somebody is giving, on astrobiology, we for some reason like this topic. So let's say it's astrobiology, and you work in solid state physics or condensed matter physics. You barely know astrobiology, but then you come and you see, can I be emotionally ignited, emotionally excited about this specific topic? And what makes that talk stand out? So if you see that, then that's a great faculty talk. Normally, the way you give it is you give it broadly enough, and then occasionally you make dips. So one slide, every 5 slides is a dip. So the experts will say, yeah, we see you're an expert too. Everyone else will not get bored, because if I get 5 slides very deep, everyone will be disconnected. So that's a very good point.
The best advice I've heard actually about preparing to give a talk is always underestimate your audience's vocabulary, but overestimate how smart your audience is.
I think it depends on what you mean by a new project, a new idea. So how do you define it? What's new?
So the things I thought of are maybe I look at a new family of materials.
Okay, so no one really looked at that. Okay.
Yeah. But that's not always, but sometimes I look it up. Someone's done something maybe a bit similar. So they're probably doing that next, what I thought.
But you need to ask yourself whether that a bit different or that group that works in that really matters for your specific application. So faculty application, and there are many people who come with proposals to faculty interviews, which the proposals are relatively basic. And I mean, there are plenty of people who do the same thing in general, but these candidates, they provide a different angle. For example, let's say I'm a chemist. I'm a solid state chemist, I'm an organic chemist, I do a lot of chemistry, let's suppose. Then I come to your field, or maybe Kagome lattices or whatever, frustrated magnets. And I say, okay, so everyone works in physics. Yeah, sure. I cannot say my proposal is frustrated magnets, but I take my previous direction and then collide it with this topic. And then you will see the ideas that they're not new in a sense, like they're not Nobel Prize winning ideas, but they will be new in a sense that few people can really do it. So few people have enough expertise. So for example, if what sort of techniques did you use, maybe experimentally, anything that make you your expertise?
I'd say I've done almost every type of
Neutron scattering for frustrated magnets. So let's say you switch to superconductors and you use inelastic neutron scattering. Would that be possible?
I guess.
It's not that too far, right? Same neutrons, just spectrally resolved, right? But at the same time, you have expertise in frustrated magnets. Some superconductors have frustrated magnetism, but at the same time, they're superconductors. And so maybe you can provide a different outlook at the what's happening at the TC between the whatever magnetic order and superconducting order. Maybe it's not like nobody really is doing it, but it's like you provide a different perspective that would be unique. That's number one point. Number 2 point is, remember that let's suppose there is a 70 years old professor who works on this kind of ideas, recently started. You are young, so you represent a different generation. So often, at least in faculty applications, with fellowships is a bit different. So fellowships are, it really depends on which funding, like what kind of criteria they use. They all differ strongly. The Swiss fellowships are very different from the US fellowships in terms of how people are evaluated. So you can't really put them in the same basket, sort of. But if you're on a faculty interview, what happens is that they look at you as a representative of your generation. Can you be the leader in your field in 5 to 10 years? Like the leader. It doesn't mean like who's doing this research right now and going to retire in 5 years. No, it's about you. So they look differently. So it doesn't mean like you have to repeat the same thing as others do. You need to be able to convey that what you propose is unique, even if it's not that unique. Because believe me, 99% of proposals are not unique. But many of them get accepted. Why? I mean, not unique if you look really, like if you ask ChatGPT, find similar studies, they will find a lot. It's not a problem. But it's not about being similar, it's about in which way are they different. So you can be 50% similar, but 50% different. So it means that there's a chance you make a discovery, right? So there's this, how would I put it? So you have to consider that your proposal doesn't have to be perfect. There's a problem with many people, myself included. When I was a postdoc, I had the same issue actually. I was trying to make too perfect of a proposal. I was trying to make it too unique, like nobody tried it. But then what I found out was that people don't understand it because nobody tried. Nobody really thought about it. They're like, okay, probably it's not even possible. So the criticism that you receive can be too overwhelming for you to be accepted as a result. So there is a trade-off between being too new, like so wildly new that nobody understands what you do, and being too mundane, too boring, too obvious. So there is a boundary, and everyone finds it in a slightly different spot. But a postdoc is a great time when you can explore those deviations. You can go a little bit away from your from a PhD, ideally a lot away. So if you do their physics, if you move to biology, cellular biology, and you did condensed matter physics, maybe as a faculty you can merge the two. That's amazing. You'll probably have plenty of invitations, but very few people do it. So you see, but there are still people who, for example, who work on magnets, all their PhD, postdoc, maybe even the second postdoc, and they get position at Harvard in this specific direction, because at that time, in that specific department, they had a call on a professor who would work in magnets because they need to fill the gap of, for teaching, for everything, and that's it. They hired. So it really also is about being at the right place at the right time. So there are a lot of things. It's not just like if I come up with a great idea, everyone will hire me. It's a lot of other things. So that's why it's so important to try to apply to, say, 50 schools, maybe 30 schools, as many as you can, and see what kind of responses you get, and start applying very early. So as a postdoc, you just start a postdoc, start applying. It doesn't hurt. But you go through this cycle of coming up with an idea, proposal, faculty interviews if you're lucky. Maybe you land a position, who knows? But if you don't, you know what to do again and what to redo, what you have to correct for in your next round. So you're not waiting for that. Right. So there are a lot of things to what you say.
Sorry, I have a question then. Like you said, after doing a postdoc, then the industry finds say, okay, then what kind of expertise that he can bring to the company? Let's say that. Then either that will be the same question if you directly go to industry with PhD. Like usually your PhD is not related to like whatever.
But then you compete with people from your age group or from your career age group. Let's put it this way. So if you had a PhD, it depends now on the company, on the country. Sometimes your PhD is not considered a job. Then you're just, okay, I'm out of the university, so freshly coming out. So you will be considered as an ex-student, so just a graduate. In some cases, this can be taken into account as your job experience, which is great. But then, of course, you will need to show that it's somewhat useful to a company.
So company will likely take postdocs as like a job experience instead?
No. I mean a PhD. Now, if you move to a postdoc, that means that you keep getting your more and more experience in specific directions. So now you have to be compared with equally experienced people in other fields. So now imagine that there is another applicant, maybe from inside a company, maybe from outside, who is from industry, who spent your 4 years of, let's say on average, 4 years of PhD plus 2 years of postdoc, 6 years in industry, in that field. So, and then that person applies, and then you apply from academia, have no idea about what industry cares about. Then you have 2 applicants. Who do you think they will interview? So that's the problem. Like when I was a postdoc, I was applying for industry jobs, 0 chance. I know people who had a lot of struggles. Sometimes you hit the right, like you apply at the right time, the right place, and you get it. Yeah, that's right. Helps. But I think in general, we see a very clear trend. As you're a bachelor, it's very easy to get a job, but it will be entry level. Then your mastery, it's a bit more difficult, but it's still relatively easy to get a job. Often also entry level, rarely something bad. But then a PhD gets harder compared to masters. Some companies will hire you for an entry level job, but then you work along with people who just get bachelors. It's not really good, so you're kind of overqualified for those. But then you're not qualified for anything beyond the entry level, right? Because you never worked in industry. Like, what can you bring? So then it becomes a bit of a risk for a company. So then it depends on the company. Now imagine you're a postdoc. You're overqualified completely to enter any entry level positions, and you're underqualified to get into a management position because you're not there. You have never worked in industry. So this is where the problem is. It doesn't mean that you can't find a position. Of course you can. People do find it, but it's much harder. So for example, I was at one MRS. You know what MRS is, right? Materials Research Society conference. I was talking to the chief recruiter from the top chip. The company that manufactures the big machines for the chip development. So it's like physics, engineering, electrical engineering, material science, and he said like we almost never hire postdocs. We don't care about your postdoc. Like we want, as in the U.S., as in the Bay Area. So we like, if you have a PhD, it's okay, maybe, but then a postdoc, no. It doesn't mean like it's everywhere, but that's what I was told.
I have such a hard time getting what you mean, because like in the sense that you do a PhD. I get for the PhD part. That part is like it get, and then you add 2 years to do a postdoc.
Sometimes 4.
Sometimes 4, but let's say it's 3. You know, let's say you just do 2.
2 years, yeah.
I really don't understand why the industry would judge you differently if you just finish your PhD or if you done a postdoc.
Because they think that you decided to go for academia only, and so that decision means that you're not going to be committed to industry most likely. You're coming to industry out of desperation, not because you're interested, if you like it. And there could be other reasons. I mean, I'm not saying everywhere, like people get hired again, but it's statistical, it's much more difficult. Maybe 3 times more difficult, maybe 4 times more difficult, yeah. But you need to, this is why, guys, please go to conference, talk to recruiters there, talk to companies there. They have like all those booths filled with like equipment and stuff, right? And just go and talk to them and see, if they're the sales managers, even if they are product managers, they still were hired at some point. Talk to them about their experience, explain that you're a fresh PhD, you're considering postdoc, is it gonna improve my capacity to get a position? And you will hear all these stories, and then you will get yourself tuned sort of more precisely to like whether you want to get that postdoc. I'm sorry, that question was first.
You're going to postdoc. You're committed to that
Yes,
and that kind of puts you in like industry.
In most cases, yes, unless you're in the biotech field, there you may be required to do it. And maybe in quantum, I'm not sure about quantum because this is just starting to emerge and it can collapse any time, but maybe it will go up.
Let's say you're in that category.
Yeah.
It's not helpful. Yeah. And then as we've seen earlier, like even like tenure or like faculty positions are quite competitive.
They're competitive.
So there is some chance that you just fail at that.
Yep.
And then you wasted like 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
Postdocs. And
Exactly.
In
terms of like if you go to industry anyway, then yes, I'd recommend to go to industry then right after a PhD. There's no need to really, your postdoc, yeah, okay, maybe you can do a bit more of your measurements, maybe some neutrons, maybe X-rays, maybe it's great, but you join a company as a product manager for some, I don't know, potential stats or some devices. It has nothing to do with your postdoc. So in some way you wasted your time, yes.
So then what? So you don't get a faculty position.
Yeah, and then you end up with a position search, right? So that's why people go for a second postdoc, third postdoc. I know plenty of people who, especially in Germany, was some time ago, it was very popular going for a second, third, fourth postdoc because it was like a scientist position kind of, but like on a contract level and contractual scope. But then the problem was then later in Germany they said, no, like we don't like it. Let's do it this way. Postdoc is like 4 years. Second postdoc only if there's like a big reason for this. And then all of a sudden people started looking for jobs elsewhere because the political situation changed in the country. So it's hard. That's why we don't have so many postdocs. How many postdocs do you have in your group compared to number of PhD students? Unless you're at Stanford where you have sometimes 30, 40 postdocs per group. Like in most universities you have 1, 2 maybe per 5, 6, 10 PhD students at best in the department on average. And that means postdocs are not very, and another reason for this is because funding agencies, they don't want to give you money for postdocs. They'd rather give you for PhD students. So then the number of postdoc positions is very small. So you go there, but only if you really have a good understanding of what you're signing up for. That's my take again.